Every morning, before the city of Toronto even thought about waking up, Yewande was already on her feet. She did not have the luxury of a slow morning. No coffee in bed, no lingering under warm blankets. At 4:30, her alarm would go off. Not that she needed it much anymore. Her body had learned the hours the way a farmer learns the seasons. She would rise, pull on her coat, check on her daughter Sade still sleeping in the small bedroom they shared, and then head out into the dark. Yewande Boateng had come to Canada from Ghana 11 years ago with a nursing certificate, a suitcase that smelled of her mother's cooking, and a belief, stubborn and bright as a new coin, that honest work would carry her where she needed to go. And for a while, it had. She had found work at a laundry service downtown, then a cleaning company, then eventually a position as a care aide at Sunnyside Long-Term Care Home on Lakeshore Boulevard West. The pay was not much, but the work suited her. She was patient with the elderly. She had the kind of hands that could adjust a pillow without waking a person, the kind of voice that could talk someone through their fear of dying without making it sound like a rehearsal. But the years had also taken from her. Her husband, Kwabena, not the Kwabena in the list her church kept, a different man entirely, a quiet carpenter from Kumasi, had died 3 years ago from a heart attack that nobody saw coming. He was 41 years old. He had been making breakfast. After that, it was just Yewande and Sade, 9 years old. Sharp as a blade, that girl. Always asking questions that adults couldn't answer properly. They lived in a basement apartment on Runnymede Road, in the west end of the city. The landlord, a man named Gerald Potts, was the kind of person who sent rent increase, notices the way other people send birthday cards, reliably, cheerfully, and without any real awareness of the damage they caused. He had raised the rent twice in 18 months. When Yewande asked him, politely, to please give her more time on the last increase, he had looked at her the way certain people look at pigeons on a patio table. "I have other interested parties," he said. She had paid. She always paid. Even when it meant she ate rice and sardines for 2 weeks so that Sade could have a proper lunch at school. The soup kitchen on Bloor Street West was called the Open Door. It was run by a retired school teacher named Sister Margaret, who wore the same green cardigan every day and made a groundnut stew that could make a grown man cry. Yewande had started volunteering there on Sunday afternoons, almost by accident. She had gone to drop off some canned goods and ended up staying to help serve. That had been 2 years ago. She had not stopped since. But it was not at the Open Door where this story truly begins. It begins on a Wednesday morning in late November, on the corner of King Street West and Bathurst, where Yewande caught the streetcar to work. There was a man who sat there every morning. Not begging, exactly. He did not hold a cup or a sign. He simply sat on a folded piece of cardboard, leaning against the wall of the old brick building, watching people pass the way a person watches a river. He wore a heavy army surplus jacket, gray-green, and boots that had clearly seen better decades. His face was weathered and dark, with a beard that had gone mostly silver. And his eyes, when you caught them, were steady and sharp in a way that made you feel, oddly, like he was the one observing you, rather than the other way around. His name, she would later learn, was Nilante. But for a long time, she knew him only as the man on the corner. The first time Yewande stopped, it was not planned. She had an extra container of jollof rice. She had made too much the night before, a habit from cooking for a family that no longer existed in the same form. She had been carrying it to work to eat for lunch. But as the streetcar pulled away without her, she had miscounted the minutes. She stood on the corner beside Nilante, and the smell of the rice must have reached him, because he turned his head just slightly, the way an animal does when it catches a familiar scent. She hesitated. Then she handed him the container. He looked at it for a moment, Then he looked at her. "Thank you," he said. His voice was low, careful, like someone who had learned to use words sparingly. "It's Jollof," she said, "from Ghana." Something moved across his face, not quite a smile, but close to its neighborhood. "I know Jollof," he said. She almost asked him how, but the next streetcar came and she had to run for it. After that, she started making extra. Not every day at first, but then, yes, every day. She would pack 2 lunches, one for herself, one wrapped in foil and tucked into a separate bag. The portions she gave him were generous because she was incapable of giving any other kind. Aide found out on a Thursday morning, when she woke earlier than usual and saw her mother at the kitchen counter, carefully packing the second container. "Mama," Aide said, in that tone she used when she was about to say something that was actually a question disguised as a statement, "we don't have that much food." Yewande sealed the container and set it down. "We have enough," she said. "But who is it for?" "A man on my corner. He sits outside." Said was quiet for a moment, working through this with the methodical seriousness of a child who has already learned that resources are not infinite. "Does he have a home?" "I don't think so, my love." Another pause. Said went to the fridge, looked in, closed it again. Then she went to the bread box and pulled out 2 slices. "Put these in too," she said. "He can have bread with it." Yewande looked at her daughter for a long moment. Something behind her eyes filled up and then settled, the way a lake settles after a stone has been thrown into it. "Okay," she said. "We'll add the bread." The weeks passed. November became December. Toronto dressed itself in the grudging winter way it always did. Gray skies, salt-stained sidewalks, the particular cold that comes off Lake Ontario that doesn't just chill you, but seems to locate somewhere inside your chest and sit there. Yewande was always on the corner. She didn't know how he managed the cold. She started bringing an extra pair of thermal socks. She bought them in a pack from Dollarama, nothing fancy, and tucked them into the food bag without comment. He took them with the same quiet gravity he took everything. They began to talk, in fragments, the way people do when they have very little time, and understand that conversation is still worth having. She learned. He was from Accra. He had come to Canada in the 90s, worked in construction, had family once, had lost things she did not press him on. He had been on the streets for 4 years. He read books when he could get them. Someone would leave a paperback near the corner occasionally. And he had worked through an entire John le Carré novel the previous winter, he told her, holding it inside his jacket to keep the pages dry. She told him. She was from Accra too, technically. No, Kumasi. She corrected herself. No, she had been born in Cape Coast but grew up in Accra. He laughed at her geographic confusion, and it was the first time she had heard him laugh. It sounded rusty, as if it had not been used recently but still remembered how. At work, Yewande said nothing about any of this. She arrived, changed into her scrubs, and did what she always did. She cared for people. She helped Mrs. Oduya with her morning pills, sat with Mr. Ferrenson during his bad memory days, listened to a woman named Gladys talk for 40 minutes about a man she had loved in 1963 and never quite recovered from loving. Her supervisor at Sunnyside was a woman named Brenda Calloway. Brenda was competent, organized, and had the emotional temperature of a filing cabinet. She was not cruel. She was simply not particularly interested in the human element of human care, which was an odd quality in someone who ran a long-term care facility. But there it was. Brenda had been watching Yewande lately, not with warmth. The previous month, the facility had begun a restructuring process, which was the word they used when they wanted to reduce staff without saying they were reducing staff. Yewande had been at Sunside for 5 years. She was good at her job. The residents liked her. The families liked her. The feedback forms that occasionally passed through Brenda's desk said things like warm and attentive and felt like family. But Yewande was also the aide who occasionally arrived 4 minutes late because she had stopped at the corner on King and Bathurst. She was also the one who had taken an extra 15 minutes on her lunch break twice last month to bring soup from the kitchen downstairs to a resident who wasn't technically on her rotation. Brenda had noted these things. Brenda noted everything. In the second week of December, Brenda called Yewande into her office. The office smelled of hand sanitizer and cheap printer ink. There were no photos on Brenda's desk. There was a motivational poster on the wall that said, "Excellence is a habit," which Yewande had never been sure was inspiring or threatening. "We're making some adjustments to staffing," Brenda said, folding her hands on the desk. Yewande waited. "Your position will be affected. We're consolidating the morning shift care team. We'll need to let you go at the end of the month." The room was very quiet for a moment. Yewande had known something was coming. She had felt it the way you feel weather in your knees before the clouds show up. But hearing it still felt like a hand reaching into her chest and rearranging things without permission. "I see," she said. "You'll receive 2 weeks severance," Brenda said, already moving her eyes toward the papers on her desk, the conversation apparently complete. "I've been here 5 years," Yewande said, not accusingly, just noting. "I understand that," Brenda said. "I'm sorry." She did not look sorry. She looked like she had 3 more of these meetings before noon. Yewande walked out of the office, back down the hallway, past Mrs. Oduya's room, where she could hear the television murmuring, past the nurse's station where someone had taped a paper snowflake to the window. She went to the break room, sat down, and put her hands flat on the table and breathed. She had rent due in 3 weeks. She had Sadie's school fees for the winter program. She had nothing saved. Not because she was reckless, but because there had been no room to save. Every dollar had gone where dollars were needed. She sat there for 6 minutes. Then she got up, put her apron back on, and went to check on Mrs. Oduya. That was who Yewande Boateng was. Whatever fell on her, she picked herself up and went back to work. She did not tell Sade that night. The girl was working on a project for school, something about ecosystems. She had construction paper spread across the whole table, and Yewande did not want to put that worry into her daughter's hands. Sade was 9. There was still time before the world needed to press itself into her. But she lay awake that night long after Sade was asleep. She looked at the water stain on the ceiling of their bedroom, the one shaped slightly like the map of Lake Superior if you turned your head, and she did the arithmetic she had been doing in her head for 3 years. What comes in? What goes out? What is left? What can stretch? The numbers did not stretch. In the morning, she still packed the 2 lunches. She knew, logically, that this made no sense. She was about to lose her income. She had maybe enough for 1 more month of groceries at their current pace. And yet, she stood at the counter and made the jollof, and added the bread, and put it in the bag. There are things a person does not stop doing because stopping them would mean something about who they are, and who they are is the one thing they cannot afford to lose. Yewande understood this without having words for it. She just made the food. On the corner, Ni Lante was there as always. But that morning, as she handed him the bag, he did not take it immediately. He looked at her. "You look tired," he said. "I'm fine," she said. He looked at her for another moment in that steady, unhurried way of his. "Yewande," he said. It was the first time he had used her name, though she had told it to him weeks ago. "Are you in trouble?" She almost said no. The word was right there, automatic and polished from years of use. Instead, she said, "I lost my job. Yesterday." He was quiet. The morning traffic moved past them. Somewhere a truck made a reversing sound, mechanical and insistent. "I'm sorry," he said. "It's all right," she said, which was what she said when things were not all right, but she had decided to carry them anyway. He held the bag in both hands and looked at it, and then he said something she did not understand until much later. "You have been feeding me for 2 months," he said, "every morning, without asking for anything." "You needed it," she said simply. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "I did." The streetcar came and she got on it. 3 days later, Yewande was packing up her locker at Sunnyside, her last shift, when she got a call from a number she did not recognize. Toronto area code, but not a contact in her phone. She almost let it go to voicemail. Then she answered. "Is this Yewande Boateng?" A man's voice, professional. The kind of voice that is accustomed to speaking on behalf of things larger than itself. "Yes," she said. "My name is Conrad Wells. I'm calling from Asante Capital Group. I was given your name by a man named Yewande Asante." A pause. "He's the founder of our company." Yewande sat down on the bench in the locker room, slowly. "He asked me to call you," Conrad continued. "He would like to meet with you. At your convenience, but soon if possible." She was quiet for a moment. The locker room smelled of antiseptic and old winter boots. "The man on the corner," she said. Not a question. Just checking that she was in the same reality she thought she was in. "Mr. Asante has chosen to spend periods of time in reduced circumstances," Conrad said carefully. "It's something he does periodically. He believes it gives him perspective." Another pause. "He thinks very highly of you, Ms. Boateng." Asante Capital Group had its offices on Bay Street, in a building that made Yewande feel, standing in the lobby in her good coat, the coat she wore to church and to important appointments, like she had somehow walked into a film set for a different person's life. Conrad Wells met her at the elevator, a lean man in his 40s, careful posture, the suit of someone who had been wearing suits since his 20s. He shook her hand and led her down a hallway hung with photographs, not of skyscrapers and stock charts, but of places, markets in Accra, a fishing village somewhere, children in school uniforms under a tree that threw enormous shade. Yewande was waiting in a corner office. He was wearing a charcoal suit and looked, if you did not already know him, like any other serious man of business on Bay Street, but his eyes were the same, steady, unhurried, taking in more than they gave away. He stood when she entered. "Yewande," he said, "thank you for coming." She sat across from him. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Outside the window, Toronto spread itself in every direction, gray and enormous and indifferent, the way cities are. "I owe you an explanation," Yewande said. "You owe me nothing," she said, "but I'll listen." He had built Asante Capital from almost nothing. That part was true. He had worked construction when he first came to Canada, had put everything he saved into a small investment, had watched it grow through years of careful, unglamorous work. The company now managed assets for foundations, pension funds, development organizations. They did work across West Africa and the Caribbean. The photographs in the hallway were places where the company's investments had built schools, agricultural cooperatives, health clinics. Every few years, Yewande would disappear. His board knew it was coming. His assistant would set his affairs in order, and he would go. Sometimes to a village in northern Ghana, once to a small town in rural Nova Scotia, and, this time, to the corner of King and Bathurst in Toronto. He carried nothing with him that he had not earned outside of money. He wanted to remember what it felt like to need, and to discover who, if anyone, would see him. Most people walked past. Some dropped coins. A woman had once given him half a sandwich, and then looked away quickly, as if embarrassed by her own generosity. Yewande had brought jollof rice, every morning. For 8 weeks, she had added bread because her daughter told her to. "I wasn't testing you," Yewande said. "I want to be clear about that. I don't believe in testing people. What you did, you didn't do it because you expected a reward. You did it because that is simply who you are. Yewande looked at him steadily. What is it you want, Mr. Asante? I want to offer you something, he said. Asante Capital has a community health partnership program. We fund care workers to get advanced certification, nursing degrees, nurse practitioner programs. We pair them with facilities across the city that have agreed to prioritize hiring from the program. It's funded entirely by the foundation. He paused. There is a spot available. I would like to offer it to you. She was quiet for a long time. Outside, a siren moved through the city and faded. My daughter, she said finally. The program includes a living stipend, he said, enough to cover rent and basic costs while you study. 2 years. She looked at her hands in her lap. They were not young hands. They showed what they had done, all the things they had carried and cleaned and held. She thought of Sadie at the kitchen counter, pulling bread out of the bag because that was who her daughter was too. I need to think, she said. Of course, he said. She stood. He stood. They shook hands, and his handshake was the same as it had been on the corner, plain, unadorned, without performance. At the elevator, she paused and turned back. The jollof, she said. Did you actually like it? He smiled then, really smiled, the full version of the thing that had been hovering near his face all those mornings. It was the best thing I ate all winter, he said. She told Sade that evening, after dinner. She told it plainly, the way she told Sade everything, without softening the hard parts or exaggerating the good ones. She told her about the corner, and the man, and the office on Bay Street, and the offer. Sade listened with her chin in her hands, very still, the way she got when something was genuinely holding her whole attention. When Yewande finished, Sade said nothing for a moment. Then she said, Mama, you gave that man bread for 2 months. We gave him bread, Yewande said. And he was rich the whole time? He was. Sade thought about this. She had the look of someone sorting a very complicated feeling into the right drawer. Is that fair? Sade asked. Yewande considered this seriously, because her daughter's questions deserved serious answers. I think, she said slowly, that he was also in some way in need. People can be poor in ways that have nothing to do with money. Sade was quiet again. Are you going to say yes? She asked. What do you think I should do? Sade looked at her mother, really looked, with those sharp, clear eyes that saw more than they were supposed to at 9 years old. I think, Sade said, that you worked very hard for a very long time, and I think you should say yes. Yewande pulled her daughter into her arms and held her there. When did you get so wise? She said into the top of Sade's head. From you, Sade said, muffled against her mother's shoulder, obviously. She called Conrad Wells the next morning. She accepted. There were practicalities, paperwork, enrollment dates, the logistics of 2 years that would look nothing like the last several. She gave notice to Gerald Potts, who raised an eyebrow and said he'd already been planning to list the unit anyway, which she suspected was a lie designed to make her feel she had not inconvenienced him. She found a smaller, better apartment in Parkdale through the stipend coordinator at Asante's foundation, a place with windows that actually let in light, a kitchen where Sadie could do her homework at the table without her mother working around her. Brenda Calloway, she later heard through a colleague, had herself been let go in January when the restructuring finally hit the management level too. Yewande felt no satisfaction about this. She had wasted no space in self on bitterness about Brenda. She had needed that space for other things. She ran into Nilante once more, in the spring, not on Bay Street, but at the Bloor Street location of the Open Door, where she had gone back to volunteer on a Sunday afternoon. He was sitting at one of the tables, having soup, in ordinary clothes, not the suit, not the army surplus jacket, just a man eating soup in a community kitchen. She sat across from him. Sister Margaret's groundnut stew, he said by way of greeting, lifting his spoon. Best in the city, she agreed. They sat together and ate, and talked about nothing important. The soup, the spring weather, a book he was reading. A question Sade had apparently asked him in a letter she had made Yewande pass along, about what it felt like to live outside in winter, and whether birds were better at it than people. He had written back, Yewande told him, 4 paragraphs. Sade had read it 3 times. She's going to be remarkable, he said. She already is, Yewande said. If you are the kind of person who gives away your lunch when someone needs it more, even when your own pockets are thin, even when nobody is watching, even when the logic of it makes no sense, then this story is for you. Not because the universe will always send a limousine. It won't. The math of kindness doesn't work that way, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. But this, what you give away, doesn't disappear. It moves. It becomes part of something, part of the texture of a day, part of the weight a person is able to carry, part of the quiet inventory of goodness that holds the world together more than we ever account for. Yewande knew this before any of it happened. She just knew it more fully after. And sad, already remarkable, already sharp as light through water. She would carry it further still. If this story found something in you, stay with us. There are more where this came from. Stories of people who held their goodness even when the world gave them no particular reason to. Subscribe, and we'll keep bringing them to you.